Yay! Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. It's kind of nice to know Renolda is we're not as big as y'all, but we're kind of the same kind of garden in that we have art and we have an historic grounds and a historic home. Um, and as you said, my talk is about drug abuse. Get your lawn off drugs, and it's basically I'm going to give you some tips and tell you why and all that other stuff that I hope will help make you guys safer in the gardening world. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about the gardens. I wasn't always in horticulture. I was actually a talent agent for stand-up comedians. I handled people like Jeff Foxworthy and Brett Butler, and here we have some young guy. I can't remember his name. Robin Williams. He would come through on when he would do HBO shows, and he was actually on Mork and Mindy when we took this picture. But he would the comedians would come through and try out their acts at the club, and if people laughed, then they would take it and put it on their shows. But I'm a big believer in following your passion, and I had always been into plants. Literally, I mean, seriously, from the day I was born, I loved plants. Of course, when I first got this license tag, sadly, from the DeKalb DMV, it was actually backwards, 2 implants. And I'm like, no, this is not what I ordered. And the last time I checked, I'm pretty sure they're mine. So I had to take it back. And gosh, the same guy who gave me gave me the 2 implants was beet red. It was pretty funny. I did have a slide of that, but I can't find it anymore. So I don't know what happened in my move. But plants led me to my dream job of Smith Gilbert Gardens. And Smith Gilbert Gardens is an historic home. It's 16 acres, and it was originally owned by Hiram Butler, and he got his money in the railroad industry, and he owned huge tracts of land. But in the 70s, Smith and Gilbert bought the property, and mainly because they were big birders, believe it or not. And we are located at the base of Kennesaw Mountain, which is a migratory flight landmark for birds. So we get bird species through here that most people don't see in Georgia. But who were Smith Gilbert? Well, as I said, they were big birders. And so some of the first plants they planted were species for birds. Like we have a huge viburnum collection, a huge holly collection. And these pictures I just took this week. And so the cedar waxwings are coming through, and they're one of my favorite all-time birds. I mean, literally the hollies are just heaving with them right now. But they also were big art collectors, and we have one of the largest outdoor art collections for a garden our size. And this year we planted 10,000 daffodil bulbs around all of our artwork to create art in bloom. And I'm hoping it'll really be quite the display. But for me, of course, the plants are what is the artwork. And we have one of the largest and, in my humble opinion, one of the nicest bonsai collections in the country. So I hope you guys will come down and visit me, and I'll show you around. I'd like to show you just 4 shots taken this to show you in every season. This garden is so beautiful. This was summertime. This is fall, winter, but really it's the springtime that this garden, as in most of our gardens, is really spectacular time of year for us. As John said, we created a crevice garden. It's the first of its kind in Georgia. What you're looking at are concrete blocks with plants planted in little tiny crevices. And so we're able to grow plants that we can't typically grow here in the South, like really cool cactus, species bulbs. And I always say it's not the cold that kills the plants here, it's the wet. So this soil is incredibly fast draining. And this is just another view from the crevice garden. But we at SGG are chemical free. Well, except recreationally. We don't use chemicals except recreationally. No, I'm kidding. We do not use chemicals. We don't use herbicides, and we don't use pesticides. I do have an army of volunteers that we get out there, and I mean, I don't have a manicure because I'm out there hand pulling weeds, but we weed and then we mulch. We weed and then we mulch. And that's what makes our garden so easy to maintain. It wasn't always that way though. For many years, the old director owned his own landscape company, and so he sprayed voraciously. Everything got sprayed, herbicide, pesticide, and it was the day, I will tell you, that the gentleman who maintained our rose collection showed up in a hazmat suit and an air respirator to spray fungicide on the roses. And he told me that we couldn't allow, which we had children in the garden, a school tour, we couldn't let them play in the rose garden because the fungicide is so toxic. So I had been here maybe, I don't know, 3 weeks when that happened, and a bell went off in my head, and I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. So the rose garden is now organic. And I'm proud to say that the whole garden is basically organic. So we did it for them, but we also did it for them. I just cannot tell you how enjoyable it is to see kids run and play on a lawn that is safe for them. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about the butterflies in our exhibit. So butterflies have been making our planet interesting, more beautiful for over 50 million years. They are a successful insect, as delicate as they are. And they're the ambassadors of the insect world. So I consider butterflies like a gateway bug, because people who are normally afraid of insects forget at the end of the day, they're just another bug. I mean, a really pretty one, but they're another bug. So in 2016, we opened a Garden with Wings, Butterflies and Biodiversity. And we started with a hoop house, John. We tore it apart. It was only about 4 feet high, and you had a duct to go in. It was just really a storage area. So we raised it up by 10 feet. And then we put this shade cloth on there that's super tiny hole so that predators couldn't get in there. And this was all done and all planted by our volunteers. And the most important thing, and this is key for the homeowner as well, that if you want pollinators in your garden, you have to provide a food source for the whole life cycle of that animal. So in the butterfly exhibit, you'll notice that that tree that she's kneeling over, this is a tulip poplar that I know they get like 80 feet tall, but we keep it pollard. But this is an important tree in the pollinator foodscape. This was actually 3 weeks later, it just exploded. We had huge warm temperatures, and now it was time for the butterflies. But the children, it was so crazy because when I first came here, this was a very adult garden and there weren't a lot of children. There weren't a lot of things for the kids to do. When we opened up this butterfly exhibit, let me just say the kids poured in, and our admission increased 250%. We called it the butterfly effect. And in 2017, we were awarded the Cobb Travel and Tourism for Spot On Award for new event of that year. So I was really proud of that. And this year, or last year rather, we doubled the size. So typically we had, in just the one little house, we had 250 butterflies, but now we were able to have 750 native butterflies flying around. So where do our butterflies come from? Well, they come from ethically sourced butterfly farms, and yes, there is such a thing, but let me just say, they're not all ethical. There were some that shipped butterflies unsecured, and most of them were dead. It was like riding in a bus going over a cliff, and there was nothing to hold you inside. So I found this company, and they're out of Florida, and they come shipped in these little boxes, and they're packed in dry ice to keep them in a state of torpor, which is a state of hibernation. So they're caught and they're put in these cellophane envelopes, and they're asleep. They don't eat for the first 24 hours that they're out of their chrysalis. And so as soon as we open it and the light of the day hits them, they start immediately breeding or eating. They can't, it's like they just go crazy. And we do order also Chrysalis. So these are Monarch butterfly Chrysalis that we have to hang up. It's the only one actually that has to be hung so that as the butterfly comes out of the chrysalis, its wings can unfold. Because if you don't do that, then their wings can get damaged and then they'll never be able to fly. So this is kind of cool. I want to show you our exhibit. If I can, whoops, hold on, let's see. There we go. So this is just to give you a quick idea of what the butterfly exhibit looked like. Right now, we only had about 500 butterflies in it at this time. We were getting another shipment in on that Friday. But it was probably one of the best things I've ever been involved with, because I'd never seen a butterfly egg before. I'd never seen half the caterpillars. But it was like being in a James Cameron, you know, that Avatar movie. It was like all these fairies flying around, and it was just, oh my God. It was just incredible. And their wings, when nobody was around, sounded like snowfall. There were so many butterflies in there. It was really spectacular. But I have to say, we have a real drug epidemic in this country when it comes to our lawns. So let's talk a little bit about the journey to the perfect lawn, how we got there. So in the old days, this was the typical front yard. I mean, you grew your own vegetables, you had everything out in the front yard. And then it was early in the 18th century that it became very, you know, to show off that you didn't need to grow your own food out front, that you could have vast swaths of lawn. And this became the status symbol. And now it's led us to this, which now we're obsessed. Americans are obsessed with these lawns. We're spending thousands of dollars on chemicals just to keep a green lawn, which to me is like a vast desert, a green desert with no life in it whatsoever. And let me just say, chemicals don't discriminate. They kill everything. It doesn't matter. So the typical suburban landscape only has about 20 to 30% of native plant species. And I think we really, if we're going to change the American landscape, we really have to get homeowners associations involved and really kind of move away, because to me, that landscape of all those homes and that, it looks like a cancer to me. And then of course, we're hearing about how we're losing all of our birds and the decline in all the bird populations. This happens to be a wood thrush, and wood thrush eat insects. And here we're destroying all their insects and their habitat. So we're destroying their food source and their habitat. We are a wood thrush habitat. We're listed as such, and I heard it 2 years ago, but I will tell you, I've not heard it in the last 2 years. So that's kind of disturbing to me. So for me, I want to make weeds fashionable again. I'm sorry, I think that lawn is spectacular. Dandelions, when people ask me what my favorite flower is, I tell them it's outside of hydrangeas. It's a dandelion. I love the way they smell. I love everything about them. And they're the #1 food source in the early spring for bees. So I think we need to rethink the American landscape. And if I get preachy or get crazy, forgive me. But I just want us to be able to eat our lawns, because most weeds are delicious. And we're going to talk about a few that are growing in your lawns right now if you don't have chemicals or, you know, pesticides, whatever. So this is Purslane, and we have it growing here in the garden. We all have this as a weed. Let me just say, it's so high in omega-3s and fatty acids that it's actually higher than salmon. And if you bite into it, it has this rich texture. You can feel it on your tongue. So the next time you're out in your garden and you see Purslane, take a bite. I'm telling you, it's delicious. Plantain. This is a weed we see everywhere, but it's one of the food sources for a caterpillar, a little moth that travels around. So this is an important food source. The seed pods are edible. They taste really nutty. And the leaves, when they're younger, taste just like spinach. And chickweed, which is coming up everywhere right now. So, I mean, why not? What better way to get back at your enemy, the weed, than to eat it? So chickweed is completely edible. And I will tell you, I had a brunch back before COVID. Everything's BC before COVID. And all my girlfriends came over, and I made this beautiful salad. I had dandelions in it. I had violets in it, and chickweed, and, you know, dandelions. And my girlfriends are like, God, this salad's really good. Where'd you get this mix? I'm like, my lawn. You're eating my grass. You're eating my lawn. And they couldn't believe it. So, but anyway, chickweed is just, it's packed in vitamin C and vitamin B. I mean, everything that you want. But the most versatile vegetable you can possibly grow in your garden is the dandelion. And yes, I said vegetable because it is a vegetable. Every part of this plant you can eat and make a fantastic wine from, actually. So again, this is an important plant. And if you were to walk out on our lawn right now, you would see it's blooming with the lamium, purple and yellow right now. It's so beautiful. So again, as I said, dandelions are one of the first food sources for the bees. And this is an Italian bee because I am a beekeeper. We have bees here. I'm fixing to have 4 hives because we're going to split them today, but they're really tall hives. But again, it's because we don't have chemicals here. And the dandelion is such an important food source because of all these little nectaries and pollen sources. Look how many are in that. So it's an important plant. Here I am working one of our hives, and there's one of my sweet little behinds. This is actually on a salix pussy willow, which is another important food source for bees early in the winter. But you know, the Italian bee is not our native bee. And I do have to let you know that we do have several species of native bees. In Georgia, we have 532 roughly species of bees. And in North Carolina, you guys have about 500 native species, but across the country, we have 4,000 species of native bees. Believe it or not, yeah. So it's not just the honeybee that needs help, it's all of our native bees. So how do you attract these native bees to your property? Well, you could build an Airbnb, or do what I did and just take a log that I stripped the bark of and drilled holes in it, and I put a little pretty, roof on it. But these are the ground dwelling bees. And let me just say, these are some of the sweetest bees ever because they don't have honey to protect. So they're very docile. It's sweat bees even. So when I tried to get a film of it today because they're starting to emerge with these warmer temperatures. But last year they were swarming, and I never got stung because they're very, there's, like I said, there's no honey for them to protect. So what can you do as a homeowner? Well, you can leave some wild areas of your lawn. Well, maybe not quite this bad, but I'm talking about even the simplest of a wood pile or leaves, because there are so many species of pollinators and insects that are important for birds that live in the leaf litter. And if you look at in the fall, people are like bagging up their leaves, they're burning their leaves. And all I can think about is, oh my gosh, how many animals are being killed or destroyed because they're removing, half their chrysalis. So fireflies spend 2 years of their life as a larva in the leaf litter. And if you remove that, then you're removing the firefly. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's been a real decline in the firefly. So we're spraying for mosquitoes. We're getting rid of the leaf litter. I can't stress that enough, to leave the leaf litter and at least leave some areas of your garden wild. This happens to be the Luna moth chrysalis or a cocoon, and she wraps her cocoon up in a leaf. And so how many Luna moths have you gotten rid of? And her food source for her caterpillar is the sweet gum tree, which a lot of people hate, but it's such an important tree in the landscape for birds and for insects. And this is the Luna moth, which again is one of those species that lives longer as a larva or caterpillar in the ground than it ever does as a butterfly. And most butterflies or moths, believe it or not, only live 2 weeks. Except for the monarch butterfly, they live about 6 months. But also there's 2 other butterflies that migrate, and that's the zebra longwing, which I don't know if you guys have up there, but also the cloudless sulfur that comes through. So a lot of these plant species that we think of as weeds are important food sources for these insects. And again, as a food source for them is a food source for birds. So what can you do again as a homeowner? Well, let's include more native plants. As I said, most landscapes only have, I bet you not even 20% of native species in their yard. So include native plant species, but you have to be cautious of cultivars. And here's why. I found this out the hard way. I went to a plant auction and bought a passion flower vine, or I bid on a passion flower vine, and it ended up costing me $125, but it was a good cause. Because I thought it was so pretty, and I was going to bring it back and let my caterpillars of the Gulf fritillary eat it. Let me just say, they don't like it. They like our native passion flower vine because it's softer in texture and it's easier for the caterpillars to eat. So not all cultivars of native plants are attractive to pollinators. You want to avoid hybrid species and hybrid varieties because they tend to breed things out of them that the insects actually like. So always choose cultivars that are most, similar to the species in flower color, in size and shape. And then when you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever it is you go, try to get plants that have not been treated with a systemic insecticide within the last year. It takes a year for that to come out of the plant. And so we, again, found out the hard way with some of our caterpillars, which we had gotten in some parsley that had been treated. And it was not very pleasant, and all the caterpillars died. So again, you want to diversify the bloom time. Here, this shows you an ideal of early spring through summer into fall. Camellias right now saved my bees this year. This was a really good bloom season for the camellia, and they were all over them. So camellias are actually great for pollen for the bees. And then color matters. So bees tend to be attracted to purples, yellows, and whites. And then bees have difficulty distinguishing red from green, believe it or not. So we did an experiment. I had an intern from one of the high schools around here. And we set up 4 jars. One we painted blue, one was yellow, one was white, and one was clear. And the jar that was blue, we filled it with sugar water and put holes in it so the bees could get the sugar water. But the blue one always emptied out first. So blue, bees really like blue. And then red and orange flowers attract more hummingbirds and butterflies. Also plant in masses. And why is this important? Well, you know how it is on Saturday afternoon and you're running around trying to do all your shopping? And, you like your bread from this store, but, this store has the better eggs or better produce. So you're running around wasting a lot of energy and a lot of gas. If you plant in masses, you're saving those insects time and energy from just hopping from flower to flower instead of having to fly so far from flower to flower. And then plant plants that support the whole life cycle of the insect or butterfly. For instance, everybody knows Asclepia or milkweed. And again, this was another interesting thing. So they find that the tropical milkweed is very attractive to monarch butterflies, but they're telling people not to plant the tropical milkweed because it stays up and blooming so long, it doesn't force the butterfly to leave and migrate. And then there's another rule of thought that these farm-raised monarchs don't have the DNA to travel to Mexico. That's not in their memory bank to travel to Mexico. So they find that they're just hanging around. But I did want to point out that she is laying an egg on the underside of that milkweed. And that's what a butterfly egg looks like. So, in the old days, people would see eggs all over their plants and then they'd spray them or they'd squish them. Well, you're killing an important insect, quite possibly, not knowing what you're killing. So it's important to plant for the whole life cycle. Because if you don't, then you're not going to get to have these ridiculously cute caterpillars. Seriously, that thing is they're one of my all-time favorite caterpillars. So does anybody, and sadly, there's the butterfly, but you guys have a state butterfly. And your state butterfly is the eastern tiger swallowtail. And their number one food source is the tulip poplar, a tree that most people, for me, it's one of my favorites. It's also one of the first nectar sources for bees early in the spring as well. But there's the caterpillar of the eastern tiger swallowtail. This is their #1 food source. And also another weed tree that people can't stand is the black cherry. And this is, I can't tell you enough how important this tree is for birds and for butterflies. So again, this is the eastern tiger swallowtail eats this as well. It's a huge nectar source for all sorts of pollinators. It provides an important sugar source. It's so high in sugar, but it also produces these berries that the birds absolutely love and need. And here are the eggs. This is actually on our black cherry that we have in our butterfly exhibit. And so these are the eggs of the eastern tiger swallowtail. And then in the butterfly exhibit, as I said, you saw the whole life cycle because we provided a nectar source for the adults and we had a food source for their caterpillars. So people that had never seen a caterpillar or an egg, a butterfly egg before, were just thrilled with them. And this is just, I just love caterpillars. So butterflies are very host specific. And this is the black swallowtail. Now, black swallowtail, like everything in the carrot family, which is like parsley, fennel, they love fennel. So these are the caterpillars of the the black swallowtail. So again, they're very, very host specific. This is the Gulf fritillary. This is one of my all-time favorite butterflies. And this is passion flower vine. Now, I know it has a tendency to take over and can like run rampant, but I used to grow it in my fence in Chamblee, Georgia, where I used to live. And it was taking over the whole garden, but by the end of the summer, it was gone. So this butterfly keeps this plant in check. And if we get rid of the butterfly, then, it runs rampant. But this was such a great, I love this plant. It's like one of my favorite plants, and it's the most intricate flower you'll possibly ever see. But this is her little egg, and you can see the caterpillar is inside the egg. She's orange, and this is what the caterpillar looks like. It looks scary, it looks thorny, but it's not. It's one of the sweetest little caterpillars ever. So let's talk a little bit about how to attract hummers to your garden, because they're an important pollinator too, and they're going to be coming through now. In fact, usually by the time the azaleas bloom here, that's when they start coming. So I'll be putting mine out probably in a couple of weeks, my feeder. But plants are just as equally as important for them. And these are some of my top favorite plants for hummers. So trumpet creeper, I know it can be invasive, but it's a huge nectar source for them. Bee balm is important. Trumpet, Linister sempervirens. Cardinal flower is one of the #1 plants to attract them. They like that red, or even lobelia, the blue, I can't think of it. John, you know what I'm talking about. Spotted jewelweed, red columbine, Indian pink is very important. Red buckeye. Oh my gosh, our red buckeye here was covered in hummingbirds last year. So if you can find a red buckeye, it's in our plant sale. I definitely get a red buckeye. And then again, Monarda, anything that has a nectar source, they're going to want to go for. We also have a hummingbird banding event in September where we actually capture hummingbirds and band them. We have one of the few people in the country that's licensed to capture them, and then we band them and record their weight. So you guys have all heard about the spraying for mosquitoes and all that. I really hope that you guys don't do that because of this plant. So if you have trouble with mosquitoes, I highly recommend you plant Cala Americana. They're doing studies now that they think that this will be more effective at keeping mosquitoes away than DEET. Now, the problem with this plant is that its oils they're not very stable. And so we have them all over the gardens here. And literally, if there's a mosquito, it will find me. But all I have to do is put 1 or 2 leaves in my pocket and they stay away. I'm not kidding. I cannot stress how effective this plant is, except for that you have to constantly be picking leaves because the leaves don't last very long. But this is very, very, if you want to keep mosquitoes away, plant this in your garden. So if you want more pollinators in your landscape, then leave it be. Leave some leaves in your garden. Stop using chemicals. We have to get off the easy track and simply stop using chemicals and leave small areas of our garden wild. Because I'm sorry, this simply is just not sustainable. I mean, it just makes my skin crawl because I can't even think about how toxic that is, not to mention there are no natives in there. So yeah. So Pollinator Week is coming up. It's June 21st through the 27th. And if you guys want more information or need anything else, go to pollinator.org. They are a wealth of information. And we work with them constantly. And so, yeah, it's a huge organization because let's face it, if your garden isn't being eaten, you're just not doing it right. And I want to go back to the rose garden because I will tell you, we do have problems with fungus. I'm sorry, roses don't want to grow here in the South. They want to live in Oregon where they have the rose parade and all that, and it's drier. So we do use a solution of baking soda, water. You put a couple drops of dishwashing liquid to make it adhere to the leaves, but the salt in the baking soda actually kills the fungus that lives on those leaves. So we get a big backpack sprayer, and in the middle of the when it's really humid and we have a real problem with it, then we'll just go through and hose everybody down. We also use rotten milk to keep the deer at bay. But I also bought these little solar things that emit a high-pitched squeak, and those actually work to deter the deer as well. But you know, and then there's some things that roses you just can't fight, and they are going to lose their leaves, and they are going to look pretty crappy at the end of the summer. And I just think our tolerance level needs to change as a homeowner. And I think if we stop seeing weeds as a bad thing and maybe change the name, get a new marketing person for the weed, that I think we'll all live healthier and we'll all live better. I know I talk really fast. And I probably should have added more slides. But if anybody has any questions, I'd love to take them if you guys have any.
I know one person, Lisa, asked about moss.
Moss.
You know, they're trying to encourage more moss in their yard. Do you know of anything that relates moss with pollinators? Or,
you know, the only thing I can say about moss is that it creates a moist environment for the larva of like the lightning bug. They like a very moist environment to live in, and they need that humidity. And I think moss would provide that. I know in Japan, moss gardens are a huge, important garden for them. And they literally wear socks on their moss lawns and then keep it weeded to keep other, plants out of it. But yeah, I think it provides a habitat. Absolutely.
Someone was asking about what you do about Japanese beetles.
So yes, we have Japanese beetles, but you know what? I put up 2 bluebird houses on either side of our rose garden area. And last year we hardly had any Japanese beetle. Now, I don't know whether that was because we had more birds or, people were spraying in neighborhoods outside of us, because we do have a large neighborhood behind us that I know sprays for mosquitoes and things like that. But we really didn't have an issue. If they were to get, bad, then simply, I don't believe in those traps. I think they actually attract them. So we usually get buckets of hot water because I want them, if I'm going to kill anything, I want it to die, quick. And so we get hot water, and then you put a little bit of dishwashing liquid in there to make it so that they can drop easily into the water, because if you don't, they'll float. But that's what we do.
And
no chemicals.
You were using spoiled milk for deer?
Oh yeah, spoiled milk. So we don't cry over spoiled milk over here, let me just say. But milk, if you spray it on the roses or hydrangeas, which I need to do that. So the deer have found my hydrangea collection. And so we spray rotten milk, and it smells bad to us, it smells bad to them. So we do spray it. But of course, like anything, if it rains, you have to add more. One of the other things we do for weeds around here, we use that corn gluten. Once we weed, we put that down. For cracks and walkways, especially in the crevice garden, we use horticultural vinegar. And then there's also a product at Lowe's. It's a citrus-based weed killer that's actually we've had really good success with. But one of my favorite tools to use to get weeds out of the sidewalk, a blowtorch. We have a horticultural blowtorch. Let me just say, I will say that during times of drought, I do have somebody follow me around with a hose just in case. But yes, a horticultural blowtorch has become my new best friend, and it's fun to use.
Someone was asking about controlling English ivy, if you've had any. I mean, I hate to say I use Roundup right when it's emerging, but cutting it back a lot so it weakens it.
That is key. So if you do have to use, okay, let's back up. So native plant people that go out on these rescues are big proponents of Roundup because it kills all that. It kills the ivy, it kills the privet. They don't have a lot of time to spend in these areas to bring back that native habitat. So they do use Roundup, but they do it in a way that it's not so willy-nilly. You know, they're not killing everything. But English ivy, it's so important to know that if you've ever felt English ivy, it's very waxy, and that waxiness keeps the chemical from killing it. So what John said, cut it back, let that new growth emerge. It's not got that protective coating, and then spray. I'm not opposed to using it. I just, I have volunteers that'll come pull it.
Someone was asking, I don't know, we actually use liquid fence in the garden for the deer.
Liquid fence is good too.
Yeah, I didn't know if that had any. There's also a product called, it's actually started by a woman in Raleigh, I think, out of her home kitchen, and the brand name is I Must Garden. And she's got, deer deterrent, squirrel deterrent, or, a couple different things, but that's organic. And I know my sister uses that outside of Charlotte, and it's been quite effective.
Try that. I Must Garden.
Yeah.
Try that.
Cool. And it's always good, I've heard that use this, like liquid fence for a couple years and then switch to a different product, because
that's why we're using the milk right now, because they got used to the liquid fence. Oh, I meant to take a picture. We also have a fake coyote. He is plastic and he looks real, and yeah, he's actually taken me by surprise a couple times, and I remember putting him there. But he actually worked for a minute. The problem is you have to constantly move him around like he's real, and then you buy fake, or not fake, but coyote urine on it. And then also one of the people that maintains our collection, the Rose Garden now, swears by human urine, and I'm like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to know what you're doing over there, but she says it works. Also, human hair. So if you go to a salon and get hair, that's supposed to work. I haven't tried that, but yeah.
Someone was asking, talking about public gardens. We do adopting best practices, and a lot of the gardens, are the Million Pollinator Initiative. There's a lot of things going on within APGA that are definitely, leaning into best practices for the pollinators, as well as pesticides. There's, we have, I don't want to call them support groups, but, we probably need those in public gardens as well. But, most public gardens really are trying to showcase the best practices. And, one of the biggest missions for public gardens is education. So
yes.
They're mentioning, a place that's across the street from us, and they mow right up to the water's edge, which, and sometimes it takes time. It takes, it takes a place like, say, Grayland to understand that that's important to the community, that instead of mowing up, let's establish a natural barrier between, if they've got lawn and, lawns, they have their roles in the garden, but someone was saying, about how to contain clover. It doesn't bother me. If it's green, I'm good.
You know what? As long as it looks like grass from a distance, I'm good. But I would rather walk barefoot on a clover lawn than I ever would on some sprayed perfect lawn. You know, I mean, seriously. And clover's so important for the bees, and it's edible. All I have to do, if I get hungry, all I do is go walk around. I dare. It's crazy. But I really hope if you guys are in the Atlanta area that you guys will come visit us here, because I think for a public garden to do what we're doing, and really, I will say, when I first came here 5 years ago, they looked at me like I had two heads when I said, I'm not using chemicals. They didn't think I could do it. They didn't think it could be done. But we are doing it on 16 acres. And if we can do it on 16 acres, then the homeowner can do it on 3/4 of an acre.
Yeah. I did like how you mentioned about the American Beauty Berry, because I think it's one of these things that I think it's a Native American.
Yep.
You know, it's in the origins of Native Americans using them as a deterrent, and then, you know, it's like, well, let's see if there's anything to this, and
yes,
it is.
It is. And I'm telling you, we put it in our pockets because I don't like to put chemicals on myself. I don't like to use DEET. Not that this is a shameless plug, but this is what I use on the dogs and my cat. It's flea, flicker, tick kicker, and it actually keeps mosquitoes away too, but it's peppermint, lemongrass, healthy for you, healthy for them. So, I mean, I spray this in the summertime all the time if I'm not around any Cala. So again, it's all about getting away from the toxic chemicals. But Beauty Berry, it's showing so much promise if they can just get that oil to, stick around a little bit longer.
Yeah. And someone was asking about your ratio of baking soda to water for the spray.
So if you have a gallon, it's usually a gallon. I'm not a gallon, a spray bottle. About this size. I would put a teaspoon or a tablespoon of baking soda, fill it up with water, and then just a drop or two of dishwashing liquid so that it sticks to the plant when you spray it. Again, you'll have to reapply after every rain, but it's very, very effective.
Oh, great.
At keeping powdery mildew down.
Someone said that they heard that sod is now available with a clover blend.
Oh, I saw that too. Yeah, I would love to. If you were to walk out on our lawn right now, like I said, the lamium is in bloom, the dandelions are in bloom. That lawn makes me so happy. So, yeah.
And someone was asking, it was flea flicker.
Oh, what did I do with it? Oh, here we go. So I don't know if you guys can see. It's Flea Flicker Tick Kicker by Arc Naturals. I get it at Chewy. But I spray it on my dogs before I let them outside so that they don't bring any fleas inside. And let me just say, in the 10 years I've used this product, I've never had a flea problem. But I also spray it on myself. It repels, kills fleas, ticks, mosquitoes on contact. So.
Well, cool. I think we're good. No more questions are coming in, but definitely. Lisa, the invitation's always to come up our way, and we definitely need to come down and visit.
Yes.
I really want to thank you for taking the time and sharing this with our garden friends. And just to give everyone a heads up, the cherries that we've installed are just starting to show a little bit of color. Turf will start going down tomorrow. God, I feel like a hypocrite right now. I promise I'll go sprinkle some clover out there. But the garden really is starting to wake up here. So definitely come and stroll the gardens. The trillium are coming up in the woodlands. I've seen the trout lilies are emerging. So there's a lot to see out at Ronalda. Definitely get out in nature. It definitely makes me smile. And I think it's great great to see spring really starting to show up now.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope I wasn't too preachy. I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank everyone. We'll see you next week. I've got to admit, I forget who's next week. I'll have to pull up on the calendar, but every Tuesday we've got someone lined up. And remember, the plant sale will be coming up at the end of April. Friends get early access, so It's important to become a friend of the gardens. But with that being said, just we look forward to seeing you in the gardens.
Bye, guys.
you,
Thank
everyone.
you.